guys! It is the beginning of September, which means that it is almost time to start university. If you're starting university this year, then big congratulations! Hi, I'm Triya and I am a junior doctor working in London. Last year I graduated from Oxford Medical School. Today I'm going to be talking about what I wish I knew before I started university. I am going to be giving you some big sisterly advice about things such as partying, friendship, studying, health and much more. Let's get into the video. So the first thing I want to talk about is adjusting to university life. The transition from school to university is a big one because you're finally independent, you may be living by yourself, and you might have to be in charge of things like your own studying timetable, your friendships, your money, the things that you eat and drink, and much more. It is a big transition into the adult world and it can be quite overwhelming. I think it's important to remember that everyone around you is also going through the same thing, so it's okay to feel a bit overwhelmed because most people are. Something that a lot of people go through, especially at the start of university, is feeling homesick. It happens to most people and it's completely normal. It just means it'll take a little bit of time to adjust to university life. My advice would be to take something from home to your room in university to make you feel a little bit less homesick. So this can be things like photographs, a blanket, some kind of furniture from home if you have space in your room. My first year at university, I had a lot of photos up on my wall. I think I also brought a chair from home, and I also importantly brought my favourite pillow. Now when it comes to homesickness, some people say that you should limit how often you speak to your family because that might make you feel more homesick. I don't think that there should be any particular rule about how little or how much you should speak to your family. You should do what feels right for you, and I think you will quickly get into a routine and a schedule when it comes to speaking to your family. You'll find what times of the day and the week work better for you. For me, I found that the early evening was the best time to FaceTime my family back home. Another thing that is quite common to feel in university is imposter syndrome. This is where you feel like you're not good enough to be where you are. Now, this is another thing that lots of people experience, and I definitely felt that as well. I think you have to remember that you got into university and the course who accepted you wanted you as a student to be there. Imposter syndrome is not easy to get over. It starts with self-acceptance and feeling like you do deserve to be there. When I started in Oxford, I definitely felt out of place. There were a lot of people who I would class as geniuses there, and that certainly wasn't me. However, over time I did learn to accept that I also tried really hard to get in and that I was also deserving of a place there. And although this does take time, it's important to remember that you're not alone in how you're feeling. So another thing you might be feeling, especially early on, is that your course isn't right for you. So it's very reasonable to have doubts about your course, especially early on, because you don't really know what to expect. And university courses are very different to subjects you study at school. Even if your subject at university is something that you did at A level, the level of study will be very different. This adjustment does take time, and it is reasonable to have doubts at the beginning. If this is something that you're feeling over a long period of time, then definitely talk to people about it. Have a chat to your tutors and your course mates and see if people are feeling the same way. And if you really want to consider changing your subject, then this is a conversation you can have with your tutors. I do want to say that it is very normal at some points in your degree, especially when things are very hard, to feel like you want to quit. I definitely felt this in medicine, especially around second year when our exams were piling up, but I think that's a topic for another video. Let's talk about academics. One of the biggest parts of the transition from school to university is the level of studying that you have to do. Whilst at school, you were probably spoon-fed and the teachers told you what to write down and what to learn for your exams. Now, this isn't really the case at university, where your tutors will really push you to think independently and come up with your own opinions about things. Now, this can seem scary, but it does get easier with time. One of the hardest things to do in university is how to manage your studies on your own and balance that with all the other things you want to do in university. However, it is really lovely to actually be in charge of your own learning because you can set your own pace and you can study how you want to and when you want to. So if you study a course such as medicine or a science subject, it may feel a little bit more like school because your day will be relatively structured, because these subjects have lots of contact hours. And by that I mean things like lectures, lab work, classes, practicals, seminars, and small group teaching, which we call tutorials in Oxford. Because you have all of these things to do, your day is relatively structured and you'll have less free time in the evenings and weekends to fit the rest of your studying in alongside all of the other things you want to do. Whereas if you're studying a subject that has less contact hours, such as English or history, you will have to be much more in charge of your own work. My one piece of advice is don't leave it all to the last minute. Now this seems quite obvious, but if you can, then space your work out through the whole year, because you'll be thanking yourself in the summer when it comes to exams. However, I know that as a student, no matter how far in advance you get set your work, you will always end up starting it the day before the deadline, and that's totally okay. When it comes to contact hours, my advice is to definitely try to attend as much as you can, because this is structured learning and it is somewhat like school where people are teaching you things. So I sometimes found, in first year especially, that I would miss my lectures because I was trying to write an essay for a deadline that was coming up. However, I found that trying to study the lecture topics on my own at home took much more time than 50 minutes, which is what the lecture time was. So I ended up having to spend hours trying to catch up with the work that would have only taken me 15 minutes to study had I actually gone to the lecture. The final thing I want to talk about when it comes to academics is exams. So generally you'll have exams at the end of each year of university. However, you might also have interim exams in between. So in Oxford we had exams at the beginning of each term called collections, and then we had final exams at the end of each year. When it comes to studying for exams, I don't think that anyone should ever have to stay up all night to study. For most people, their brains won't function as well in the middle of the night, and I think it's better to prioritize sleep. The latest I have ever stayed up studying was the night before my anatomy exam, and I stayed up until 3 trying to study, because when it comes to medical school, anatomy is one of the rare things that you can probably cram right before an exam, because it's a lot of memorizing things. However, I felt very bad the next day. I had a headache and I needed to have a lot of caffeine just to get through the exam, so definitely don't recommend. One tip though is to think about how seriously you need to take each and every exam that you study. In an ideal world, you take every exam seriously. However, some exams that you do won't end up counting towards your final degree, so it's quite useful just to check and see which ones do count and which ones don't, and then you can allocate revision time accordingly. Make sure you do try to keep up anything else that you're doing, for example your extracurricular activities. Make sure you still get to see your friends and do exercise and enjoy life, because ultimately you're here not just to study but also to gain life experiences. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is friendships. So when you start out at university, you're probably not going to know many people. Although this may seem daunting, it's a really nice opportunity to find new friends and meet new people. And remember that everyone is in the same boat as you when it comes to starting university. It is important to keep touch with your friends from home. However, remember that you are here to make new friends and branch out. So whilst you should keep in touch with your home friends, definitely don't spend all your time just texting them. It can seem daunting to meet lots of new people, but in university there are lots of different ways to make friends. So for example, if you're living in university accommodation, then you can try to meet and get to know the people that you're living with. So when I was in first year, it happened to be that my neighbour ended up being one of my very closest friends. Other really great places to meet friends and like-minded people are different clubs and societies. Lots of universities have clubs for specific interests, so I know people who went to societies such as Anime Society, Doctor Who Society, and different sports clubs. Although it can seem like university is a place just for drinking and partying and socialising with your friends, feeling lonely is really normal, and everyone feels lonely at some point in time. One of the nice things about university is that because you're spending so much of your time with these people, you will end up finding people who are like-minded, but it's not necessarily going to be the people that you met initially. It's okay to not be best friends with people that you are doing your course with or people that you're supposed to be friends with. Don't feel too much pressure to make lots of friends at the start. Although it can seem like everyone is drinking and partying and having fun, I guarantee you that everyone feels lonely at some point, and this is totally normal. So another thing I'm going to talk about in the relationship section is dating. So university is a really good chance to start dating if you haven't already, and to explore that if that's something that you're interested in. Dating is fun, and you can meet people the same way that you might make friends. Also, when it comes to dating, you can also meet people through apps, and this is increasingly becoming much more common and popular. When it comes to friendships and relationships, there can obviously be lots of drama and gossip. Now this can be really fun, but if you don't want to be the centre of gossip, then I would advise don't date your course mates or people who you work in very close proximity to, because if something goes wrong, then you will definitely become the centre of all types of drama. If you've never dated before university, then that's totally okay, but try not to jump immediately into a relationship. Take some time to experience dating, meeting new people, making friends, and so forth. Try not to jump into a relationship immediately. Let yourself figure out who you are as an adult and as an independent person, and then it will feel better when the time comes. If you are meeting people through a dating app, that's totally okay. It is very common, and often in university towns, a lot of students will be on the dating apps, but it's just important to remember in terms of safety. If you are meeting someone, try to meet them in a public location and tell a friend where you're going and when to expect you home, so that you've got someone who's keeping an eye out for you. So one thing I want to talk about when it comes to surviving university is keeping yourself safe. Now this can mean a lot of things, but today I'm going to be talking about safety when it comes to drinking, partying, and looking after your things. This is especially important if you're a woman or if you are walking home alone a lot at night. When it comes to safety around drinking alcohol, the number one most important thing I tell people is to always keep an eye on their drink. Now this is to avoid drink spiking. Now sadly, drink spiking is quite common, although in an ideal world, people wouldn't spike other people's drinks. However, there are some things you can do to try to reduce your risk of this happening to you. So this means don't leave your drink unattended. So for example, if you have to go to the loo, then I would advise to either finish your drink or discard it and get a new one later if you can't bring it with you. It may seem a bit tricky logistically when it comes to looking after your drink and having other people buy you drinks. So I think it's totally acceptable if you want to let someone buy you a drink. I think there is a way that you can do this in a safe way. So for example, if you're at a bar and someone wants to buy you a drink and you accept, then the safest way I think is to go with them to the bar and then order the drink yourself. So then you see the bartender prepare the drink and hand it to you, but then the other person can pay for it. So in that way, this other person is buying you a drink, but you are seeing it all the time, rather than you waiting at a table or somewhere else and them buying the drink and bringing it towards you. I just want to say that when it comes to drinking alcohol, it may seem like at university everyone is drinking, but I assure you that's not the case, and you definitely can have a lot of fun without drinking if that's what you want, but more on that in part 2. Another thing I think that is quite important is how you're going to get home at the end of a party, a social event, or a date. If you're going clubbing with a group of friends, then I think it's really important to have established a plan of how you're going to get home afterwards. So my advice is to buddy up and to find a friend or a group of friends that you've agreed with beforehand that you're all going to come home together. That's the safest way to make sure that no one gets left alone. If you are going out alone or you're going on a date to meet someone, then share your location with a trusted friend and let them know when you're leaving the place and when to expect you home. It sort of depends on what university you're going to. So for example, for me at Oxford, because most locations were in walking distance from each other, including the clubs and the accommodation, most students would walk everywhere. Whereas if you're in London or a different city, you may be having to take a taxi, a bus, or a tube. So take that into consideration when planning your routes home. So I hope that advice is useful. It can seem a bit scary to start university, but overall university is a lot of fun and most people really enjoy their time there. Stay tuned for part 2 where I'll be talking about health, physical and mental health as well, also sexual health, drugs and alcohol. So I'll see you in part 2.